Slimehouse TV, myself Theo Kane, hope everybody is good. Hold tight the Slime Alliance, the Slime Renegades, and everybody else that's locked in for some toy talk. So in today's episode I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to tell you all about how I created my most grandiose toy review ever. So recently I dropped a big documentary all about the old school Resident Evil Toy Biz figures, and although I do a lot of different toy reviews on this channel and I always try and keep them of a certain quality, there's definitely lots about this video that make it a step above all the other stuff that you're normally used to seeing from me here on this channel. So particularly in this video I want to talk about how I created the sets and the diorama, and then touch on some other little details that I think were standout parts of the videos as well. I hope it's something you find interesting. Let's do this. Now, ever since I had the first initial idea to create this documentary about these action figures, I always wanted to create some impressive backdrop sets to go behind the figures when I was filming them. Every time I do one of these video essay kind of episodes, I always like to try and step them up in one way or another. When I made the Robin Hood Kenner documentary, I created some backdrops and sets for that, but they were just in my garden using compost and twigs and stuff. For this one, I really wanted to step it up and create some actual sets for it. Right off the bat as well, I had a real good idea of what I wanted to create for this. I wanted to make a back alley that looked very industrial but then also very ghetto, and design it kinda in a way that's a mix between where I live and the kind of places that I grew up in, because where I'm from, Sheffield in northern England, is very gritty, it's very industrial. But at the same time, I also wanted it to feel like my own little fantasy movie set world, a little bit Blade Runner, a little bit cyberpunk. Also, whenever I'm drawing or creating my own characters and illustrating them, I always have them set against the backdrop of this cool neon lit slime city, as I like to call it, so I wanted to imagine it existed in that same world as well. And on top of all that, when it came to actually making it, I wanted to create it in a scale that not only was it fitting for Resident Evil figures, but if I ever wanted to use it in the future, I could do. Whether I pulled out a Toxic Crusader or a Bucky Aware figure, they would all still fit in there seamlessly. So I was thinking about that while I was creating it as well. And on top of everything, I also wanted to make sure that it weren't one big structure that was all stuck together, because when it came to folding it down and storing it, I wanted to be able to flat pack it and take it all apart, almost like creating my own playset that I can put away and pull out whenever I want to use it. So although I was very loose when I was creating this thing and very free and easy, there was also a lot of thought process going into it, so that I could use it in a certain way that was practical, and so that it ticked all the boxes of what I needed it to look like and what I needed to use it for. So the first thing I did was take a trip to Hobbycraft, which is a big arts and crafts store that we've got here in England. I came home with a bunch of balsa wood and foam board and started instantly cutting it out and chopping it together to create a basic shaped street set that I could start texturing and building on. To create the feel of brick on the walls, I just scored a bunch of kids' craft foam with a ruler, measuring out a brick pattern, rolling around some tin foil on it and then gluing it to the foam board walls. I did the flagstones on the pavement in a very similar way, just cutting them out to the right shape and then laying them down, but also laying them down a little irregular and a little bit skew-if, just so it didn't look too perfect. So it looked like they could have moved around over time like flagstones sometimes do. And I also wanted there to be multiple types of different textures on these walls, so I did a few different techniques to get the results that I wanted. I didn't want it to feel copy and pasted or repetitive, and I also wanted it to have lots of different finishes for the coloured lights to bounce off. This is also why I built this little alcove, which is something I didn't even originally plan to do. I just had a brainwave and decided to go with it. So this was just part of a box that my little camera monitor came in, and once I'd covered the walls in craft foam and I'd scored them to look like tiles, painted them in that old school retro mint green colour, and then gave them a couple of coats of shiny lacquer, the whole thing really started to look the part. Then I added this metal security door that I just sculpted in Nomad Sculpt on my iPad and printed on my 3D printer. Using my airbrush and some markers, I added some scrappy graffiti. Then in the corners, I painted in some Warhammer technical paint called Nurgle's Rot to make them look really grimy and pissy. I wanted you to be able to smell this thing when you looked at it. Then finally, I just drilled a hole in the top of it and super glued in the lid off a vegetable oil spray. I did this so that I could lay a light across the top of it and have another tiny light source on the board. I could also have the light flickering to make it look like the bulb was running out. Now, I made this thing in like 2 nights just experimenting, and this was also the first thing that I'd properly finished off for the diorama, but after seeing how good it came out, it just made me realise just how impressive I could make this whole thing look if I really spent some time on it. So for the ground, I tried a couple of different things. Initially, I used this gritty texture spray paint, but that didn't really work that good with the cardboard, and it kind of ruined it. So instead, I used some of this asphalt paint by AK Terrains. Now, this stuff worked perfectly and gave me exactly the finish that I was looking for. So I used another version of this as well for the concrete paving slabs and also on some of the other walls and stuff, and ended up with a real nice base across everything to work on. Once the paint on the walls and the ground had all set, I dry brushed over everything to start building up that realistic base that I wanted across all of the different areas. And taking a step back and just looking at it, I was thinking, yeah, do you know what? This really does have some potential. I'd picked up some bits from the Doncaster Toy Fair to use, including these dollhouse windows, so I got a couple of them painted and fitted into some of the walls. Again, a nice bit of variation and something to shine a light through. They also worked really well because they look like the big types of windows that you would get in an industrial estate, so I also put some mesh behind them just to finish them off and really give them that factory look. What I was also doing around this time as well is fitting magnetic strips down all of the sides and the edges so that the whole thing could be collapsed and then assembled back together. It took quite a bit of trial and error to get it all to line up, but in the end I got it all coming apart and then locking back together pretty seamlessly, so I was very happy with how that turned out. I'd also begun collecting and printing some existing STL files, which are the 3D print files that you use that you can print from your actual printer. So stuff that I was going to use for the set, like beer crates and traffic cones and that kind of thing. And then I'd also been sculpting a lot of my own random pieces, like this Biffa style bin, just as gap fillers and things that I could move around the board to create different set arrangements and compositions. One thing that I really enjoyed doing as well was junk modelling something out of bits that I had lying around, and then in 3D sculpting and printing additional pieces to fit on top of those to create new things that I needed for the set. Like, I needed a street light, but I didn't want to print a whole street light from scratch, so I used this case from a Don't Push Me Push a Push Pop lolly and some steel tube and connected them together with parts that I'd sculpted and printed, keeping everything hollow so that I could feed a little set of lights through it and created a street lamp. But not only that, I also had the batteries housed inside the base so that I could move it around the board wherever I wanted it to go, and then also get it out of the way when I flat packed the whole thing when I put it back away in storage. One of my favourite things that I created for this as well was the Japanese style street vending machine. Now when you go to Tokyo, these things are everywhere, and I always had it in my mind that I wanted to create at least one for this diorama. Again though, not wanting to sculpt and print an entire one from scratch, I took my old phone box from my Google Pixel and I worked out that if I cut holes in certain areas and then sculpted bits that went on the top of it like a frame, I could use the vacuum formed inside to look like the interior of a vending machine. So my girl printed these out for me on her filament Prusa printer, and once I had them stuck down and I put the little cans inside and painted it all up, it really did look pretty incredible. I also found out that using old cracked phone screen protectors for the glass on these kind of things worked perfectly as well. And as another added extra, I took some cheap battery powered lights and rewired them, very crudely might I add, but it did work and gave the whole thing some real nice added illumination, making it look just like the ones that you see on the streets in Tokyo. The skip that you see in the video on the board was also something that my girl 3D printed me. That was just an STL file that we found online. So I added some little pegs on the side so it looked like it could be hoisted up on a crane. Sprayed it all yellow and did some nice weathering textures on it. The exact same method that I used on the drain pipe actually. I also filled that with a bunch of small bricks that I'd cut out of an old sanding block. Stuck a bunch of little balsa wood pieces down the side to look like greedy boards. Rusted up this little BMX bike that I found in Poundland. I then took some netting off some red onions out of my fridge, put that over the top of the skip to look like the netting that keeps all the garbage inside. And then finally added some pigment powders to make the whole thing look like it was full of dust and debris. I also knew from early on that I wanted to add some kind of vehicle to this diorama, and I initially wanted a police car. So I went out to Smith's to try and find a police car that was the right scale for these figures that I could turn into a Raccoon City Police Patrol vehicle. And unfortunately, the toy shop closest to me, Smith's, didn't have any, but what they did have was a bunch of vehicles from this company called Brooder. So I'd never heard of this company before, but they made real nice vehicles. Not something I would ever normally pick up. But what I did really like about them is that they were not only actual existing vehicles that were in the right scale to what I needed, but they had actual company logos on the side, like JCB and DHL. They've got a lot of nice detail to them, but not too much detail. They was pretty expensive though. Definitely a price point that I would consider is the higher end for this kind of toy. And initially I did like the ambulance, but that were like £40, and I thought, you know what, I'm not quite ready to spend that much on a vehicle that I'm going to destroy for my diorama. So I decided to go with the JCB forklift. Now, not only because it was half the price of the ambulance, because that was obviously nice, but like I said, the whole theme that I'd gone for with this diorama was like an industrial estate kind of feel, almost looking like the back loading bay of some shops. So with all that in mind, a JCB forklift would fit in perfectly. So I got this thing home and instantly started doing my regular weathering techniques to it. Brushing on a load of technical Warhammer paints, making it look rusty, airbrushing on some inks, adding some of the AK terrain paints to the wheels, and just dry brushing the whole thing and making it look grimy and dirty. I also added a bunch of white Tipex texture paint all over the top so it looked like birds had shit all over it. And after just a couple of hours I had something that again looked really good and very fitting for the rest of the diorama. Now, I could have spent literally hours talking about every little detail that I created for this thing. About all the little different bits that I sculpted and printed out, and all the little fine details that I added. I spent a whole evening just converting these toxic sweet barrels into oil drums, and then sculpting and 3D printing new lids for them, because I didn't like the look of the ones that they came with. I spent a bunch of time drilling holes inside this one, roughing it up and building up rust textures to make it look like some old burning bin, and then going out to my local shopping mall to find tiny little fake tea lights to put inside it to make it look like it were on fire. I spent so much time working on little areas of this set that barely anybody will ever pay attention to, and I could do a whole series about how I created it and all the stuff that I wanted to create for it and never got round to. I was just constantly having ideas and always thinking of new stuff that I could do to it, and eventually it just got to a point where I had to say to myself, look, you need to start filming this episode because otherwise you're going to have this big amazing diorama that you've built for no reason. Now, when I do these big video essay episodes, I like to script them all word for word. My normal Toy Talk episodes and videos, I just do a loose script so I know what points I need to hit and freestyle the rest, but when I do these videos, these documentary episodes, I like to treat them more like a movie. And with this particular video, I recorded pretty much all of the script before I started filming anything, which helped out a lot because then I knew exactly what shots I needed to get, and I wouldn't spend a lot of time bagging a load of footage that I didn't use and just ended up on the cutting room floor. Something that I've done many times when making these kind of episodes. So this is just a little update of my rig that I'm using to make this little documentary. I say little, it's one of the biggest ones I've ever made, but we've got the screen here so that I can see if stuff's in focus. I've got the Ronin set up here on the gimbal, which I'm controlling with my phone. And we've got a light here. We've got this little lighting set up back here. We've got the little fire bin going. The street light, this light, another light back there shining through that window. We've also got the red light at the back, and then another light that makes this illuminate. So yeah, a lot going on, and a lot to like kind of handle on your own when you're trying to film all this as a one-man crew. And blow vape smoke to give it atmos. But yeah, looking really nice. Really happy with it so far. Filming stuff like this as well is when I really feel like I need a studio. Having all this rig set up in my office is cool because it's always there for me to keep going back to, but it can get a bit pokey and claustrophobic at times, especially when you need to get around the back to adjust lights and things. It's why I do a lot of this kind of filming on my own, because I can get people to help me out, and when I'm out and about filming, I've always got my little crew with me. But when I'm filming these types of intricate little setups and stuff like that, if I've got any more than one person in my office, you can't move. So I'm not going to talk too much about the actual filming or anything like that because I really just wanted to talk about the diorama build more than anything. But one other point that I did want to touch on, and one thing that I think was a great addition to the video, was all the home footage that I added from when I was a lot younger.
Swanton!
I've got hours and hours of random video footage of me and my friends that we filmed together when we were kids. My mum got a video camera for the family around the time of me being 13, and even though she bought it as a family thing, I obviously soon took unofficial ownership of it, and before I knew it, I was just taking it out with me everywhere that I went. Now, it wasn't until recently that I actually started capturing all this old footage onto hard drives, and I knew that somewhere I had some footage of me playing with my Resident Evil figures, but I didn't know where it was. And there's still a bunch of tapes in storage that I've not gone through yet, and because time was ticking, I didn't even know if I were going to be able to have this footage found out in time for the 24th. But just as I was going through some tapes last minute on the final day of editing, just having one final look, I found all this footage of me making an entire Resident Evil 2 movie with my Resident Evil figures, and I was just like, boom! Jackpot, because it's exactly what I wanted. I'd found footage of me reenacting scenes from the game, even doing the puzzle with the chess pieces from the police station, and then Hunk getting helicoptered out through the sky like the end of the 4th Survivor. I'm so happy that I found it because so many people told me that this is their favourite part of the video, and it's something that I added to it at the last minute.
Die!
When I made this episode, like I said, I wanted to have it all finished for the 24th because I wanted it to drop as a celebration of the new Resident Evil 4 game, and also because I wanted to see if the algorithm would pick it up a little bit, and unfortunately, it didn't quite hit the ground running like I think it could have. The YouTube algorithm for me is such a weird thing, I can never quite work it out, but it seems like my followers at least loved it, the ones that watched it anyway. What's mad about YouTube is you can have a certain number of subscribers and still only a small percentage of them will take the time to watch a video when it drops, and then if all them people that subscribe to your channel also subscribe to a bunch of other channels, by the time they go onto YouTube and check out the subscriptions of all the people that they follow that they've uploaded, then your video might be pushed right down to the bottom. It's why so many YouTube creators always say, make sure you hit that bell button. But then at the same time, if you hit that bell button on all them different channels, then your notifications are just full of all these videos and it might as well just be on the main feed anyway. So, like I said, YouTube is an absolute enigma. Obviously though, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody that did watch this video. I've had some awesome feedback on it and the comments really are endearing because, like I said, I spent a lot of time on this, so the fact that everyone enjoyed it so much really does mean a lot to me. This film, in many ways, in terms of toy videos at least, is very much my finest work, my magnum opus. So if you've not had a chance to check it out yet, then I really would urge you to, because this is not just a video about Resident Evil figures, it's also a video that's celebrating that era when the PlayStation had just come out and it had everybody so excited. Also, these kind of videos take me such a long time, they're so time consuming, I'm probably not going to have the chance to make another one like this for a long time, so it could be the last one for a while. I've made another video as well that ties into this whole little project where me and the crew go out to Doorway to Darkness in Doncaster, toy hunting and retro game hunting, and it's the place that I pick up the Resident Evil 1 and 2 PlayStation games that feature in this video, so keep a lookout for that because that's going to be awesome. And also, if you'd like to see me do more of this diorama building kind of content in the future, let me know because I'm more than up for it and I really enjoyed making this thing, and any excuse to create more stuff for my little slime city world, then I'm more than down for it. There's so many other little bits that I wanted to make for this diorama, a phone booth, a magazine stand, some more vending machines, so there's no reason why I can't do it. And also them Brooder vehicles that they've got in Smith's have got me having a bunch of mad ideas about creating Mad Max post-apocalyptic vehicles and stuff for that world as well, so that's also got potential for a future video. I've said in my previous videos, but moving forward this year, I don't just want to be doing toy reviews of existing figures that people have created before me. I want to try and tie stuff in more to things that I make and showcasing more of my craft and how I build and how I make toys. So I hope you're excited for that as well because I've got a lot of that kind of content planned for this year moving forward. If you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and binge the back catalogue. Like I said, moving forward, I'm going to be doing a lot more of this creative kind of content on the channel, so I hope you're excited for it. I'd also love to know your thoughts below on doing more creative projects like this in the future, and if you'd like to see more stuff like that on this channel. If you want to hit me up but you don't want to do it publicly, the best place to do that is over on Instagram at Theo_Kane_Slimehouse. I also drop a lot of exclusive content on there and try and post every day on my Instagram. So it's also a really good place to follow me if you want to keep up to date with everything else that I'm doing with the channel. Now I've also got a Patreon, and if you join Patreon there's lots of different perks. I'm actually switching them up a little bit at the minute, so the stuff that was relevant last year is going to change a little bit, but it's always going to be cool stuff that you get through the Patreon. And also, just a little added note, everybody that's a Slimer Alliance member over on my Patreon, I also tagged their name somewhere on this diorama. So all the little crates, the barrels, the vehicles, the walls, everything like that, I've all got names tagged on them, and they're all people that are signed to the Slime Alliance tier. So just another little way of me showing my appreciation to everybody that supports me through Patreon. I've also got an Amazon wishlist where you can buy stuff that helps me create these kind of diorama and creative projects and stuff for the channel. Like I said, moving forward, doing a lot of that, so it's really, really helpful. I'll also put the link to that down in the description below as well. And just want to say a big massive thank you again to everybody that watched this video, and if you haven't, I urge you to go and watch it, because I really do think it's something special, if I do say so myself. In terms of the stuff that I've made, it's definitely like my masterpiece that I've created in terms of toy reviews so far. So in the meantime, I'm Theo Kane. I'm going to catch you in the next video. Thank you so much for checking out Slimehouse TV today. Like I said, don't forget to give this video a like if you haven't already, and go back and binge the back catalogue. If it's your first time checking out the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. And until the next video, I'm gone. Pow!